We made a video a couple of months ago all about hill forts. There was one question that you, the viewer, kept on typing in the comments. That was the question of water. That seemed like a really good point, one I've not really considered before. We all need water, whether we're humans or livestock or whatever. It's all well and good having this wonderful, well-protected, ramparted hill fort, but you're only going to last 2 or 3 days under siege, well then you've got a real problem. Welcome to the story of hill forts and water. Now, if I told you that you all mentioned this in your hundreds in the last video, I wouldn't be exaggerating. Clearly it's a question that's on everyone's minds. How did we get water from the bottom to the top and sustain a population? Water is pretty fundamental to life, and as a general rule of thumb, hill forts are on hills. So let's try and piece this together with a few very different examples. My goodness me, did I put in some miles today. So this is Beacon Hill in Hampshire, and it's one of the most beautiful hill forts you'll see for one particular reason. Come take a look and I'll show you what that is. In fact, it was this very hill fort that I was walking up just a few weeks ago, and I had to stop over and over, and that made me think, well, I'm struggling with a small bag. How on earth am I carrying a supply of water up here? Could I do that? So why is Beacon Hill specifically so stunning to me? Every single side of it is steep-sided. It seems to connect to no other hill. You could almost use it to measure the mass of the earth. Whole other story. So to the northwest I've got Uffington, the Ridgeway, all the way across. I can see the Chilterns in the northeast. To the southwest I can see as far as Danebury, Crawley, those hill forts. And that direction I can see almost as far as the South Downs. This place truly is unique. This place stands above the landscape like nothing else. So how did we get water up here? The first point to make is that we do need water here, and we know this because antiquarians of old and of new have suggested there's at least 15 hut-like circular features up here on the hill fort, and apparently you can still see them today depending on the vegetation type and the time of the year. So we know there were people up here, we know they needed water. So how did they get it up here? Right now I don't know the answer to that, so let's use this video and this exercise to try and find out the answer to that question. Nice trick point. Another hill fort and another favourite of mine, Warbury Hill Fort, sits maybe 5 or 6 miles away from where we were at Beacon and is very different from Beacon. We'll come to that shortly. I wonder exactly how this one will help us understand the problem of water. Warbury is really quite vast, and that's kind of why I love it. Not quite on the scale of Maiden Castle, but it's probably a good kilometre in diameter. Now, you used to be able to just walk across the grassland there and explore, go to the trick point, all the usual things, but unfortunately it's now completely fenced off. That doesn't matter too much for today's story, because we're going to head halfway down the hill to show you what is of importance today. The modern OS maps to our immediate south show signs of springs. Well, this is good, really good, and it may provide us here with a water source. Let's go and take a look. So this was an unexpected treat. 12th century church, St Swithin's Church. So the sign says unexpected, so I've no idea any context at all whatsoever here, but it's really beautiful. So I thought I'd sort of take 2 seconds or 2 minutes to savour in this the history of this place, and it looks spectacular. Love an old church. So anyway, we're not concerned about this church as such. What we're concerned about is what's in the churchyard. Let's go take a look. So in the corner of this churchyard, maybe by the house just there, there's supposedly a spring, one of many around here. I can see the hill fort just up there in the distance. Not an impossible task to carry water from various springs up there, but I can't see any water. Now obviously we're talking about a different climate then, so maybe there was, maybe the springs would have been much more flowing at that time. But either way, we still have one more problem here. The population we talk about, well, it isn't there. There wasn't one. According to Barry Cunliffe in 2002, this site may well have been a pastoral one. And that makes good sense because we're on a natural ridgeway here. The hill fort, like many, could have been a marketplace, a trading place, a place of refuge on the high and dry ground that we've seen many times before. But this doesn't help us with our Beacon Hill quest. Okay, so it was recently suggested that on some occasions Hillforts had wells. In fact, Liddington was speculated to have one. Nothing was confirmed, but Cadbury Castle in Somerset. You see, Cadbury Castle is many things, but for this video it's definitely an Iron Age hill fort. It dates back to the Neolithic and probably beyond, with flints and pottery and also human remains. We pick up again in the late Bronze Age with ovens and even a HILLFORT type shield dating to around 1200 to 1000 BC. And then on to the Iron Age. Excavations here found plenty of evidence for round houses, and thus we have significant occupation. But what about the water? Now when you start to search through archaeological digs and records of this place, well, you don't really come up with much to help today's cause. But have a look at this. King Arthur's Well. Okay, so I'm not into legend and folklore, but whatever its name, well, we do appear to have a well. So I've scoured the internet for a date on this and I can't find one. A few pictures online and we have stone lined. Now I'm not sure why I even considered a well would work or why there would even be a well here. I think the ground is limestone, at least in the south it would have been limestone or chalk. You'd need some extremely clever Iron Age people with the ability to mix a decent pudding clay. Not practical at all and probably extremely dangerous. So wells, at least in the south of England, are probably a big no. So let's find one that was inhabited. This is Liddington Castle. I'm up on the Ridgeway. I've got a rather nice view to the north, including Swindon town. Now, I've been wanting to come here for a very long time, so this video is a perfect excuse for me to take a look at Liddington Castle and how they utilise water. How do they get water here? Now, about 20 years or so ago, Swindon Council decided to put in some sort of roundhouses to give you an idea of what it would have looked like back in the Iron Age. But unfortunately within a year or so they were badly damaged and vandalised beyond repair. But by that at least we can assume that this place was inhabited in the Iron Age, right? So Liddington is a real treat and a half. Now, such as the quality of the ramparts and the banks and the ditches and the brambles down in the ditch, I'm struggling to find a way in 2,500 years after it was built or thereabouts. In the 1800s, Richard Jefferies came here frequently and commented, "And then lying down on the grass and speaking in his soul to the earth, the sun, the air, and the distant sea far beyond sight." Each into their own, Richard Jefferies. I can just hear the distant rumble of the M4 motorway. But I do appreciate the romantic atavistic view. It is gorgeous up here. But let's not get off track. Today's mission is of course water. Through the age of the antiquarian, this site was excavated a few times. Evidence of pre-Iron Age activity was recorded along with post-Iron Age activity. And then came the summer of 1976 and we have our first Iron Age evidence. In fact, they dated the construction of the walls here between 700 and 600 BC. That's fairly early and maybe indicative of the Ridgeway that we're on. But what about evidence for people living here? According to English Heritage, they say there may have been huts here. Only a may. There is no hard, fast evidence of an archaeological dig which uncovered occupation. That's really frustrating because I came here because I assumed that there would be. 28 years on, even suggestions back then, well, there may have even been a well here. Well, that's not even a commonly held belief today. So perhaps, after all, we are just looking at another case of the Warbury Hill Fort, one that's on a ridgeway, one that was used as a route, a trading place, a marketplace, and here we are now, it's scattered with cows. Well, maybe there was activities like that, pastoral and other such trade activities, that really highlighted that this place wasn't inhabited at all, and therefore we didn't need water because the nearest water source is over 2 kilometres away. So I guess we're back to the drawing board with water. Let's move on. So we need to head to a hill fort that is standalone, that isn't on a ridgeway or a route, that is perhaps more akin to Beacon Hill where we started this journey. What better hill fort than Martinsell Hill? Sir Richard Colt Hoare came here in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and he loved the place, so much so that he excavated quite a chunk of it up on the hill there behind us inside the Hillfort, and he found evidence of Iron Age life, occupation. He found evidence that people lived here. That's exactly what we're looking for. Add to that we do have a what's called a midden, a prehistoric rubbish dump, animal bones, scrapers, all sorts to the far side of this Hillfort. So this is exactly what we're looking for right here, high up on Martinsell Hill, looking over the beautiful Pewsey Vale. What a gorgeous sight this is. But above all, we have exactly what we need. So how did we have water here? In fact, occult lore suggested that this place could have been used in times of siege, where families and herds would be sent for protection in times of danger. So there was life here, but how did we get water up here? Move forward 100 years or so from Richard Colt Hall, and we have A.C. Smith, and he rode around the Wiltshire countryside on horseback, and he mapped all of the prehistoric things that he thought were important, all the good stuff. And I love that about him, because it tells us so much more about the landscape than you can just see by walking it today. And one of the things he noted is essential for our journey here. He noted that Martinsell Hill, within the Iron Age Hillfort here, had a number of dew ponds. Now they've all been taken out by agriculture now, so you can't see them, but at last we have evidence of water here in use. We have dew ponds that he believed were contemporary with the Iron Age. Result. How does all that help us back here at Beacon Hill? We're on this monumental Hillfort. We know it was occupied, but it's not on a trade route of any kind in terms of a natural ridge. There are no dew ponds that we know of, and there's no springs or brooks, even within a couple of kilometres. It is absolutely stunning, but what about water? So I've tried to consider everything in this video. I've tried to look at springs, wells, rivers, brooks, dew ponds, and perhaps in a small way they all played their part at one time or another. But maybe we aren't using logic here. Maybe there's one thing that we're forgetting, and perhaps that one thing we'd have to fall back on any occasion, especially here at Beacon Hill. Estimations of how much water a human needs per day vary quite a lot, but let's be conservative and say 1.5 litres. Now, estimations here of a maximum population of around 300 to 400, that's 450 litres a day for here alone. So let's say I can comfortably carry 10 litres in one trip. I could make that trip perhaps to the nearest stream, 2 miles to the north, maybe 3 times a day comfortably. So that's me carrying perhaps 30 litres a day, and if there's 15 of us doing that, just 15, then we're going to be able to supply the entire camp with water for a day. That's easily achievable with just 15 people. So I think if we're under siege, specifically here at Beacon Hill or many others that were occupied, don't forget they weren't all occupied for certain, then I think we can last for a good couple of weeks with some rudimentary storage. So if you like this type of content and you'd like something different, well, you may be surprised to know that I run a podcast with my friend Headley. I'll put the link to that just up there, and we'll see you this time next week.